Languages don't die. People lose their mother tongues to economic exclusion, political oppression, and violence. In 1892, the US Army General Richard Henry Pratt argued that killing indigenous cultures was a humane way of killing indigenous peoples. Kill the native, he said, but save the man. For nearly a century, the US government took indigenous children from their families and forced them into boarding schools, where they were given English names and punished for speaking their languages. What could be more isolating than being forced to forget the language of your parents, grandparents, and community? 7,000 languages are spoken and signed today, but few are recognized by their own governments or supported online. So, for people from the vast majority of cultures, globalization is alienating. It means giving up your identity for someone else's. And if nothing changes, as many as 3,000 languages could disappear in 80 years. But things are changing. Around the world, people are reviving ancestral languages and rebuilding their cultures. As far as we know, language revitalization began in the 1800s when, at a time of rising anti-Semitism, some Jewish communities looked to their ancestral language, Hebrew, as a means of cultural survival. Hebrew had been dormant for over 1,000 years as a natively spoken language, but it was well preserved in books of religion and philosophy. So Jewish activists spoke it to their children, raising the first native speakers in over 100 generations. Today, it's the mother tongue of 5 million Jewish people, and at least for me, an assimilated English-speaking member of the Jewish diaspora, it's a reminder that 2,000 years later, we're still here.
Ima tiana etisa, etisema eshkuniyawa equalicata.
That was Tunica, the ancestral language of the Tunica-Biloxi tribe of Louisiana, an indigenous community from what is now more widely called the United States. In 1948, the last native Tunica speaker passed away, but not before working with a linguist to leave behind a dictionary. Years later, in the 1980s, Donna Pierrette and her family started taking trips to nearby universities to copy that dictionary and other resources kept in library archives. Their goal was to learn Tunica and share it with their community. Today, at least 100 speakers are enrolled in language immersion classes, and according to a 2017 census, there are 32 new fluent speakers, some of whom, like Donna's daughter Lisbeth, are teaching Tunica to their children. These new speakers are creating content, from children's books to memes. Each year, more Tunica people are learning their language again, staring down centuries of assimilation by saying, Hishtahaki, on iti, we're still here. A mentor once reminded me that our species is 150,000 years old. What could the next 150,000 look like if we all refuse to forget? If we all choose to remember? That was Tulsi, speaking the Raji language, an ancestral language of the Von Raji, whose name natively means royal people of the forest. Historically, the Von Raji lived as nomads, making a home in the lush mountains of Uttarakhand. Over centuries, they cultivated a rich knowledge of the region's biodiversity, but that knowledge was driven into decline when, in the 20th century, the then Indian government forced the internal relocation of indigenous peoples, threatening ways of life and the languages that expressed them. In 2019, there were fewer than 900 Raji speakers, most of them over 50. But today, in 2023, as we sit here in Mumbai, Raji children are learning their language again for the first time in decades. Last year, Tulsi teamed up with linguist Kavita Rastogi to build infrastructure for mother tongue education. In just 12 months, they hosted a series of pop-up language classes across 5 Raji villages, created an alphabet reader for the language's indigenous script, and trained adults to be teachers. Now, Tulsi plans to publish the first ever children's storybooks in Raji and create a childhood literacy program. Yeah. Making it possible for her community to participate in globalization on their own terms by saying, Nane Jemla, Aya Duhuan, we're still here.
Moi Bibuti Chakma, Bonduk Banga, Rangamate Bangladesh Tun, Moi, Chakma Unicode font, a keyboard design gochu.
That was Bivudi speaking Chakma, a language from Tripura, Arunachal Pradesh, and the rugged Chittagong Hills of Bangladesh. Though Chakma is technically recognized by local governments, it's rarely taught in schools. There are no public television or radio stations, and in 2015, the only Chakma language feature film was banned by the Bangladesh Censor Board for controversial content. To make matters worse, the Chakma script is poorly supported by technology, making it hard to use the language online. But this hasn't stopped Chakma activists from making their language heard. And of Chakma activists, Bivudi is among the most prolific, having documented over 1,000 hours of oral histories, and with linguist Debbie Anderson, led the campaign to digitize the Chakma script, making web fonts for modern devices. Now, he's organizing an online language school as well as in-person classes in Rangamati City, where students will learn to say, Ami, Ezoshong, Iot Agi, we're still here. When people have the tools to keep their languages alive, they do. But support for language revitalization is scarce, creating a resource bottleneck that leaves too many communities on the sidelines. At Wikitongues, we're working to bridge that gap by directly supporting the leaders of new mother tongue projects. In 3 years, we've backed 40 early-stage language revitalization programs, including Tulsi's, Bivudi's, and others here in South Asia, one of the world's most linguistically dense regions. And these are just a few examples of language revitalization on every continent, whether they're Anandilyakwa, speakers from Australia, or Vimisoris, speakers from Poland. People around the world are building bridges between their ancestors and their descendants. So, what are your ancestral languages? Remembering and embracing our cultures is a powerful way to be ourselves in the age of globalization. Because as I once learned to say in Hebrew, Anachnu, Adain, Khan. In other words, we're still here. Dhanyavad.